Hello there. Uh, it's good to have you with us, and it's great to have my wonderful wife Jody and Daniel Nunes with us.
Yes.
Hola.
Hola.
And we're coming to you in this format because of the COVID lockdown, and we thought we would just try to do something a little different than we've done on the Sunday morning in terms of our formatting, and we want to keep with the theme of looking at grief, pain and suffering. And I thought it would be good this morning to dialogue with these guys around this subject a bit in terms of just some of the challenges that we find as Western people and as Christians in navigating pain, grief and suffering in our lives, and also just to hear from them as well. How do you do this? How do we do this well? Yeah. So yeah, let's go for it.
Yes.
So let's just jump in. I've mentioned in previous weeks how, as believers, we really don't do this whole area of pain, grief, and suffering well. We don't know how to do it well ourselves, and often we feel lost at sea when we're working or we're around people that are actually struggling in some way. What are your thoughts around kind of why is that? What's playing into that?
Yeah. I mean, I think just, the way we were raised, has a huge influence in how we conversate. And I think, when someone says, hey, how are you doing? We just respond with good, and, we kind of don't believe people are actually wondering how you're actually doing. And I feel like our life is so fast paced that you're just like, wow, if you actually care how I'm doing, you actually will create the time to connect with me in my heart. But I think, that comes into play. But I think we just grow up watching interactions with people of how you're doing good. You're like, wow, you see your mom is going through so much. Someone asks her how she's doing. She says, good. You're like, okay, that's how we respond to people when they ask how we're doing. But that's, I mean, what are you guys' thoughts on that? Or is there any other?
Well, I think our whole world is set up for only being okay. Like I've talked in previous weeks as well about how we have sanitized the world around us, and that we're death avoidant, we're pain avoidant societies, and we try and put that as far away from us as possible to minimize the impact and the inconvenience around people that aren't okay. And so like when someone asks you how are you doing and you're not doing okay, it's like we don't respond honestly because we don't want to inconvenient people. I don't know, what are your thoughts, Jody?
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing really, that I think we're just how we're raised and how we learn, it's like modeled I guess to us, and so we just respond in those ways. And so we're used to just saying, yeah, I'm fine, and we don't really go any deeper than that. And like Maddie said, we're not used to pain, and I think sometimes we even step aside from people who are in pain, and we create a distance because we don't know what to do. We don't know how to cope or how to respond. Like I think it's something to teach into actually, because how else do we learn?
I think it all comes down to also we don't want to inconvenience people because we don't feel like we're either worthy. And I think there is versus if you know that you're loved and you believe the best in people, like when you ask me, hey, how are you doing? I'm like, oh wow, I believe Maddie cares about me. I'm gonna share. Part of us, I think also it's like we don't feel like part of diving into the pain is also just like loving yourself in a weird way. You're diving into your heart and you're looking at these places and you're choosing to reveal a part of yourself to someone, and you do that. What drives you to do that is because you love yourself enough to actually this is where I'm at. I know that when I reveal a part of my heart to you, you're not going to reject me. And a lot of us walk pretty rejected, through experiences and different things. And so I think pain, is so linked with loving yourself well. And I think if you're loving yourself really well, you are going to present things of your heart, and you're gonna be vulnerable to people, and you're gonna like just share things because you're like, I'm worth it. I'm worth I'm lovable enough to share the things that are happening, and a lot of people feel like they're inconveniencing other people, but I think if there's that self-value, I think you're like, I'm worth it. I'm gonna share how I'm actually doing. So I think that's also a dimension.
Although Danny Silk has this concentric circles of connection with people that he describes, where you have God, like the central spot is God, and then you have your spouse, and then you have your closest friends and confidence. And there is truth in the fact that actually to divulge aspects of your heart to people on the outer circles is not appropriate or healthy, and sometimes you see that there are people processing pain on social media with people that have no connection with, and he likens it, Danny Silk likens it to lifting the kind of the top of your clothing to reveal your kind of your underneath part, and you wouldn't do that to well, you would only do that to your spouse.
Well, I don't know, because I think that's
and I'd only do that with my spouse in the dark.
When people are desperate, though, I think they reveal, like, I remember one day having this lady come to our door, and she didn't know me, and we just bought the house off her, actually, and she came to the door, and she was just really upset and pain, and she just started crying, and I was like, oh, are you okay? She's like, oh, my mum just died. I was like, oh, I'm so sorry. And like, I didn't even know her, but you know, like when you're just desperate and pain, sometimes it just comes out like that. And I think that just shows our humanity. You know, we all want to be seen, we all want to be known, we all want to be valued. We do hold that as a deep core value. We just don't know, sometimes we just don't know it, or we just don't know how to express it. We don't learn how to live it like that. But when we're in that much pain, it just comes out. And so, yeah, I think you're right. It's valid to be careful who we choose to open ourselves to, and who we trust, and you know, share our pain with. But in some places, some people are just broken. You know, in different cultures, they would probably just deal with pain differently too. It wouldn't be just to my husband or my closest friends. It might be to a whole community, and so we just deal with it differently, I guess.
And some communities are better acquainted with experiencing and processing grief than others. I can't remember if I've shared this story. I think I have many years ago. But a friend of mine, Mick and Ruby Duncan, they ministered in Manila on the scrap heaps where whole communities used to live, these rubbish tips. And whilst they were there, Ruby gave birth to a baby, and the baby died shortly after childbirth. And she was just like totally shredded by the pain and the anguish of losing a child. There's nothing worse than a mother losing a child. And she was just raw and hurting, and within the community that she was within, losing a child in childbirth wasn't an unusual thing. And she said she got carried through this process of grieving at such a healthier level because the people around her were equipped to deal with it. They weren't feeling awkward with the grief that she was in. And she would talk about how the neighborhood would come in, and there'd be a newborn baby come in, and the mum would come and give the baby to Ruby, and she would just break down in tears, and there was no awkwardness around it. It's like, no, you're hurting. You need to feel, you need to metabolize your pain. And so anyway, some communities are just better
for sure
at doing this. So why let me ask the why question. Why do we need to process pain? Why do you think we need to do it?
Oh man, for our own health and safety, seriously. Like if we don't, like we just bury it, or ignore it, push it away, and that's just not healthy. Like, because we all know that if we just bury it, it just builds up and up and up, and we become like a volcano. But eventually we have to let it out, right? And it just, in some way, whether it's externally and sort of vocally, or whether we just end up turning on ourselves and like attacking ourselves. And some people turn to addictions and things, and you know, self-harm, and it's just not healthy. So that's why we really need to learn to deal with pain, as far as I'm aware.
Yeah, I mean, I think for me, processing pain has taught me a lot of like my heart. Like, and thinking about like, why wouldn't I process pain in retrospect? It's like, wow, I'll be losing a lot of who I am if I'm not actually leaning in. And so I think it's so important to actually like take the time to dive in and see how your heart is doing. And again, it is that like I care about myself enough to actually look and see what's going on inside my heart. And I was telling Maddie earlier, like there's pieces of your heart that kind of get frozen when we're so inundated with pain that we are not fully accessing our hearts and not fully valuing who we are. And I think that's huge. Like, why would you want to have parts of your heart kind of locked and frozen? And what unlocks is obviously like looking and diving in and with God and allowing him to take you through a journey. And I think you also get to learn a lot of God in that. It's not just yourself, but you actually get to, you begin to see God in different ways, in different aspects. And I think it's just like, it's just why not, you know? And there's a lot that you can gain from doing it.
So I have a question then, just for people who don't really understand like this speaker that connects to my heart. What sort of things do you do, or did you start to do when you learned to connect with your heart? Because
can we go there in a second?
Oh, sure.
Because I suspect this idea of processing pain may be new to some of the people that are watching, and many of us in our approach of grieving and hurting, we actually don't intentionally kind of jump into it, which is what you're talking about, and actually engage with it. We just kind of we allow ourselves to go with the current. And there's no thought or intentionality about that. And I'm not saying that you can't get through grief or pain. So it kind
of stays up here.
Well, it can do. Sometimes I think that just the way we're wired biologically, that it just does happen along the way. But I think what we're talking about is an intentionality about it. And before we get into where we want to go, I just want to hit on this other piece that we've kind of touched on as well, is that why we don't do that is, I suspect, it's very uncomfortable. Like I for me, I don't like pain.
Well, pain hurts, and I think the reality is healing hurts. But it hurts to go through that pain to get to the healing, right?
Yeah, it does. But I grew up being quite scared of pain.
Yeah.
I can remember crying in the doctor's office getting an inoculation as
like
a kid.
Vaccination,
22-year-old kid. No. But yeah, being a little kid and like being afraid of getting something that was actually going to help me, protect me, and trying to avoid all kind of pain. And I learned to run away from pain, and the thought of actually hurting and carrying hurt, just I was okay with my happy emotions, but the feeling of being sad, I somehow equated with discomfort and just not nice. And I don't know, I've not really thought about this. I don't know if my family actually gave room for us not to be okay.
We're so quick to like try to fix things, you know, and I didn't grow up with the language of like processing, you know, like I didn't even know what that was. You know, like you just don't grow up with these things. But I think as you get healthier and healthier, you just start having a better language and different like tools to almost like, okay, I have this tool to dive into this, or this different tool to go into this, and different communications, you know, like different ways to tell people that you're processing or you're going after this. Or, but yeah, it does feel like a daunting thing, you know, of like pain. You just don't know, a lot of times when you don't have the knowledge or you don't have the tools, you just don't know what to do with it, so it's easier to avoid it. You know, you're like, I don't know what to do with that, because I never was taught to know what to do with this thing, so you kind of just keep shoving it until you start like hearing the benefits of it, or how to approach it, or who to process things with, and all these sorts of things. So
I think too we have this natural sort of response in us that is the fight, flight, or freeze response. And so when something stressful happens, we tend to just even unknowingly we go into that. I've been in a situation once where I just froze, and actually it was something inappropriate that happened to me on a public transport, and I had no idea that would happen to me in the moment, that I froze. I could not move, I couldn't speak, and it was something in me, and I had no control over it. And so I think that just shows the depth of our just internal responses, that if we've not learned or learning what to do, and especially as a Christian, then we're going to go straight into those responses, and it's to protect ourselves. That's all to protect ourselves. And so often we run, and so we run from pain. Freeze is another one, but I think until we learn some of this, how to process, how to work through our emotions, we tend to go back to that sort of just basic brain response of like, okay, now what do I do? Like scream, run, whatever, fight, and get away from, I don't want that pain, right? And like as a Christian, likewise, I had to learn, okay, I'm processing something. It's not fun, but there's a good outcome because I'm getting healing, but I'm processing through this right now.
So one more thing connected with this that I want to just touch on before we look at how do we process well? What does that look like in our lives? Is grief. Now, grief traditionally has just been associated with someone who's died, but it's bigger than that, isn't it? There's many. Grief can show up in response to a number of different losses. So we were talking earlier, and you touched on in your own lives some things around grief that weren't associated with a death of a person. Would you mind sharing like grief for you, where it's shown up in your lives?
Yeah, I mean, for me, it sort of felt like death. Like my dad was absent because he was in prison, so he was in prison for 10 years, and because of some choices that he made, poor choices that he made. And so for me, not having a dad that can like be in major milestones of my life, was sad, because I am wired to have a father, to be in these areas of my life, and obviously there's father figures, but to not have a dad in certain situations, I didn't know how important it was for my health, so for me, giving in myself, I had a big emotional crash where I was just came to a place where I'm like, wow, something needs to shift. I was just so disconnected with part of my heart, and I talked to you a little bit of like parts of my heart that felt like they were frozen, and I'm just checking the computer's just.
I think it's fine. I think it's gone into screensaver.
Okay, yeah, hopefully. So grieving for me was a little bit like being sad, allowing myself to feel sad for the moments that I should have had, and it wasn't like I'm a victim, like it was a like I genuinely felt sad, like there was a sadness that just like, I don't know why, but just my heart wants to process something, and I used to just kind of power through it before, just kind of like you don't know what to do with that. But I think as I began to kind of have tools, I began to lean in and actually get a lot of healing in that, and a lot of grace and compassion for my dad, but also just compassion for myself, grace for myself, and I feel like in that there was just like, it was met with like miracle after miracle, with like relationships and even just with vocabulary, with different tools, But I feel like giving in to that journey, that process, I feel like part of my heart was just kind of given back to me in a sense. So
yeah.
yeah.
And you touched on something within that I think is key to talk about and just highlight, is that our feelings when we're hurting aren't necessarily rational. And that doesn't make them wrong. They're just feelings. And I think some of what frightens us in dealing with pain is that we react, and the rest of our life is so controlled and considered and structured. And when you're hurting, you're like triggered, or you're reacting. And yes, there can be unhelpful responses within that, but it can feel frightening and overwhelming.
Yeah, and I can definitely touch on that. Like, I think for pain, at times, I'm more like, I don't mind expressing pain, and I'm sort of okay with, like, it hurts or I feel angry or something like that. But then for me, it's the working through it so that it doesn't become destructive or you don't become a victim to the pain. And so I think there's a balance of, walking it through well and knowing, I think for anything big or small, that there is a time frame for it, I guess. And so when I miscarried, I remember that was probably the first real pain I went through as a Christian, and walking that through, and it was probably the first time I saw God in the midst of that too. And so I had a great small group around me at the time that were really supportive and encouraging, and I reached out and people would come and pray with me and sit with me, and that was really powerful. And I think just at the time, being able to know people were there and just to, I think, make good decisions at the time too, because I had to walk through this whole, when you miscarry, you go through the whole process of that, and then you go through, you've lost a baby, but you still feel like your body responds as though it's pregnant for so many weeks afterwards, so you still feel the pregnancy, and so the hormones are there, so that's kind of painful as well. And so working through those emotions was pretty hard, and took probably a good few years really until I really let it go. But it was a painful journey and painful walk, and but I actually saw God show up more in that time probably than any other time in my life, and I think that was the big key for me, is like, wow, God is really in this, and there's a bigger picture at play, and that helped. That really helped. Like, actually, from the minute I lost the baby, like, I can't even explain it, but I had a midwife with me, and she was like, oh, it's probably just some other bleeding, it's probably fine, like, they want you to hold on to hope for as long as you can. I was like, yeah. But then I actually had this vision of Jesus. I was laying on the sofa, had a vision of Jesus holding a newborn baby in his arms. I was like, oh my gosh, like, in that instant I knew I'd lost the baby. And I said to her, no, I've lost the baby. She said, no, it's fine. But I knew from that moment it had happened. And so like, he was with me that whole way through that pain. And so that, I think, that carved out something deep within me that I've always held on to. And like, honestly, without that, I don't know how to do life without pain, without him. So
and that brings us into really where I want us to get to today, which is, what does it look like for you, for us, for anyone to process pain well?
Yeah, I think it's definitely been a journey for me, and I think initially you're talking about like the circles. I swung so far that I didn't share even with my closest people, that when I was just like, I need this freedom, I was pulling my shirt up to everyone. I'm like, I much rather just like be vulnerable with everyone, and in the midst of it, I'm like, okay, that was too much, or learning that. But actually, if you are at that place where you're just like a shell, then man, just lean hard. Because I feel like we're just like, then that becomes more of like an excuse not to share. And so I feel like for me, I was just like, I'm just gonna share. I don't care. I didn't realize how much pain I was in, and I just started sharing. So just sharing, and then realizing, okay, there is such a thing as a safe place. There's such a thing as like, you know, sharing the right things with right people, whatever. But I personally joined a group. Where we did, it was 3 years of it, once a week. What you did was you show up and you had 5 minutes. 5 minutes to share, to basically take a dump. And that's what we call it. You just take a dump, and you just share whatever you got to share. Just, even if it sounds crazy. And I realized that with that, there's just a lot of stuff that, like, a lot of thoughts sometimes that create shame in us. And that we don't want to share because we have shame attached to it. And we feel like, you know, if we don't share these things, it's so weird how, like, if it eventually does become part of who we are, because we don't share it, because we don't bring it to the light. And we behold. And so being able to have a safe place where you can just like just like vomit felt so good for me. Like, it felt so good, and I just got better and better at actually identifying what is actually going on, because it all starts with behavior. Like, you start sharing things like, you know, behavioral things, you know, like, I got angry, I lashed out in this, and but then you little by little start peeling back to like, well, what you're actually feeling. You know, feeling scared.
So talk about that process, because that's a huge leap.
That is a huge
to describing behaviors or outcomes of your feelings to getting to your
and
heart.
usually we tend to, we feel like that's vulnerable, where you're like, I messed up and watch porn or whatever, right? Or you know, I don't know, got really angry at this cashier. We tend to like share those things, and we feel like that's vulnerable, but that's not actually vulnerable. What's vulnerable is actually like being able to peel back the layers and why you did that. And it does take time to realize and journey on your own to figure out, like, I was just really scared, or you know, I was
feeling lonely.
I was feeling really lonely. I was feeling really sad.
Powerless.
Powerless. And so I think just we had a wheel of just words. Sometimes you didn't know what to feel. We had a wheel that we looked at.
Literally a wheel.
A wheel of a bunch of just words that are just describing words to try to pinpoint what you actually are feeling. Because a lot of times we just don't know what we're feeling.
Oh, that's such a good thing.
And but anyways, I mean, there's tons of different little things that like really help me. But I want to hear from you guys as well.
No, that's really helpful.
That is really good, and that just touches into that piece that we sort of say to each other sometimes in our household about the zones of regulation, which if you haven't heard, get to know it, because it's like when you're really angry, it's that's just one emotional part of an emotion. It's like you're in the red zone, right? You're really heightened or something, and so teaching, and you know what, they're much more aware of that these days, and so they are like, we taught that in school, and so we're teaching that to kids, and I think learning those emotions, like having like a whole bunch of words that we can say, I think I'm disappointed, I feel disappointed, like that's kind of hard to pinpoint, but when we see it, we go, I relate to being disappointed, and that's just really important. So
But recognizing also your emotional state that you're in is really helpful. It's like,
it's a real eye-opener, because sometimes we think we're bored, but we could actually be scared, right? Or maybe we look agitated, but we're just excited. And so learning to say, actually, there's something more going on, like that's quite a process.
And I think, you know, like we're talking about the why process pain. There was a question before, but you know, a lot of stuff was coming to my mind, but I'm like, there's actually, your heart actually has needs, and you never know what it needs unless you actually like decide to take a look at it. And a lot of times there is something I realize is like, wow, I gotta pursue my heart really well, and that's a whole journey that started me, not just like, okay, I gotta process my pain, but like I gotta do something about it. And obviously talking about it is good, but there's a lot of different things that your heart needs, that Maddie needs, that Jody needs, that I need. You know, that's like, man, you know, like I reacted this way. You know, you to kind of take a inventory of your life, and you're like, I haven't had adventure in my life. We're wired to have adventure. What does that look like?
Or fun.
I haven't had fun in a long time. What does that look like for me? And all these things that your heart, that you don't know what your heart needs until you actually begin to pay attention to it.
And interestingly enough, around that, not everything that you are hurting with God can actually meet.
Mm-hmm.
It sounds like a really big statement to make, but God himself, although he can meet every single one of our needs, I don't know if he's wired us or limited himself in terms of how he responded, but when he created Adam and Eve, he's everything. He's God.
That's huge.
But he created Adam and Eve in need for human companionship.
Yeah.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's kind of what I wanted to touch on too, which was that, like, I think it's really important to see our community, see each other, like in your church, even be in a church where you can choose to really plant yourself and get connected, because like really we do need to view ourselves as we're brothers and sisters in Christ. Whether you think that sounds corny or not, we're all in this together, and we're all on this journey and this transformation, including the pain and the fun. We're all in it together. And so it's saying, actually, I'm going to trust these people around me. I'm going to get alongside those people and trust them. And so you have people that you're going to share, like what Daniel talks about, like just if it's a blur, I'm going to vent for 5 minutes, and we're all going to take turns venting and just hear each other. But I think as well as having brothers and sisters in Christ, we need our mothers and fathers in Christ. We need people above us who are going to call us to greater, who they're going to teach and speak into us. And we all need that. We all need our mothers and fathers. We need our brothers and sisters.
We really
and
do.
You know what? If we're not doing that, like we're going to run into some problems, because that's what we were built for. As Maddie just said about Adam and Eve, we were built for that connection. We are the body. This is our community. Yeah, and so learning to trust is going to require risk. It's stepping out and taking some risks in that. But you know, and it does mean we've got a fragile heart here. But you know what? We're all human, and like sometimes we think, oh, someone's going to share that, or they're going to like hold that up, or maybe they're going to try and shame me. You know what? There's no shame in saying this is what I'm walking through. Like there's no shame or guilt in anything we're walking through. It's like, you know what? I'm having a hard time right now. Okay, we need to support you. What if someone holds it against you? Then like, that just like they got a lot of growing to do. We're all here to be grown and transformed. And if that's the point of view, then man, there's some growing to be done.
And I need to bring this conversation to an end. Probably feels like we need 3 or 4 more of these conversations to happen. But I'm kind of, we gave ourselves about half an hour to do this. We've touched on some really good things. So when I make the statement that God can't actually meet every single one of our needs, he can, but he chooses not to. And sometimes the way he answers that is by giving you a Daniel or a spouse. And I think it's important, and I would say this, if you've not got people around your life that are part of your inner world, then you need to be praying and asking God to bring you someone like that, a father or mother figure, but also a peer, someone at the same kind of level emotionally and spiritually as you. Wherever I go, I always pray for God to give me a peer connection. And God's always answered that prayer for me, and that peer connection, when I engage with that person, when I start relating, I always have a really fairly frank conversation saying, look, this is where I'd like to get to in our relationship. I want us to be talking about not just the great things in our lives, not just about having fun, not just about having experiences where we're doing stuff together, but also talking about the pain, the raw side, the shadow sides of our lives, which we all have, and everyone's working on something.
Can I interject something there? Like something that I started living by is, you know, it's people that hurt us and it's people that heal us. And I often find that, you know, if I had an issue with my father, that, you know, the issues get triggered around other fathers. And seeing that restored through relationships, like God uses people so much for those things. And I really do live by that, you know, and you know, we do, obviously God is, you know, there's so much value, and I feel like the reason why God did it this way is like he wants to show us how much value there is in people. You know, there's so much value, and not only that, but like, you know, there is the way that you see God. I need that. I need that in my life. And we're so used to having just like being in my own world and so individual, you know, that it it's not growth. There's no
Yeah.
growth there. There
Yeah.
really isn't. But
Yeah.
anyways,
I was going to say,
totally-
so transformation and pain, I would say, is really important, because if we remain the same after a year or 2 or 3 or 5 years, then we need to get help, because
Yeah.
we also need those people amongst us who are going to challenge us and push us and say, okay, you've been in this so long now, it's time to get up, it's time to move forward, it's time to get some new beliefs in your system, whatever. And so I really think that's important to make sure there's transformation as
Yeah.
well, like working through pain,
Yeah.
but for a purpose, right? You're actually going to grow in that pain.
Yeah.
You're going to go to higher levels, and like don't come out of a pain, an area of pain, and be the same. Yeah, you want to grow,
Yeah.
because like God uses these things. Like he doesn't necessarily set us up for them, but he uses them.
Yeah.
And I always think of like Jesus when he went into the wilderness, and Jesus was given the option. By the devil, do this, and this, and it was like, have the world at your feet, whatever. And he was like, no, actually, I'm God's, and I'm not going to choose the devil. I'm going to stand firm in who I am, right? And so in everything we go through, every pain, every situation that challenges us, everything that comes against us, we get to choose. Am I going to choose to be God's and who He says I am and go His way, or am I going to just go after my own thing to like cover myself or hide or really just like block it out or whatever? No, actually, we're going to get transformed even through the pain, and we're going to go higher and higher and higher. So
So God is, as I've been saying, a God of comfort. He's also Jesus was a man acquainted with grief. He's been in some of the most painful situations in life, and so he's not a God that runs away from pain. And there are incredible opportunities, as we've shared, to grow in ourselves, but also grow in our understanding of who God is in that. And that will be my next message.
Come on.
So that's a key for you to tune in next week.
Nice.
But bless you all for listening to this message. I'm going to pray, and and then we're going to end there. All right.
Okay.
So God, I thank you that we've been learning that actually, yes, you're a God of breakthrough, you're a God of victory, but you're also God with us in every experience of human life. And yes, we pray for your kingdom to come, for the transformation of areas of chaos and for the healing of the broken hearts in our lives. But Lord, I pray that you would continue to equip and grow us as we encounter things in our lives that cause us pain, suffering, or grief. And Lord, make us a community that's robust and able to walk alongside others as they ache, and to be God with us, or God with them in the midst of their pain. And we pray that in the name of Jesus.
Yes, Lord.
Amen.
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 See you guys.
All right.
Cool.